you're never as good as your best and you're never as bad as your worst. You're
Oof.
probably somewhere in between. So
Yeah.
don't let that success go to your head, but don't let that failure go to your head either, right? Like you have some low moments, you have some high moments. You're neither one of those. You're probably somewhere in the middle. So just don't be afraid to make mistakes and don't be afraid to fail and don't be afraid to admit it. Right? I think that's the hard part is like, don't be afraid of like, I blew that.
Yo, 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 this is the Streetwise podcast, where we help you level up your game, level up your leadership, and level up your life. I'm your host, Matthew McReynolds. I'm a multi-brand franchisee, and I'm a franchise consultant, which means I help people find, launch, and build their ideal franchise business. My main goal is to help you get off of zero and become the person that your dreams need you to be. Buckle up, get your popcorn ready, let's go. Yeah, we just gotta hit it because I'm known for like, it's just my curiosity. It fuels this whole thing. And so I'll start asking you questions, then I'll be upset that I didn't press the record before.
Right.
So, okay, Streetwise
Yeah,
Nation. Yeah, Streetwise Nation. We got Ron Taylor here. And Ron Taylor, I'm gonna be real with you guys. We have never talked before. So, Mr. Taylor, what the heck do you do? Well, first, how are you? How are you, man? What's going on?
I'm wonderful. Like I couldn't be any better. I couldn't be any better. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I imagine, man, you got a lot of stuff going on. I feel like when you have as many things going on as you do, it could go one of two ways. Either everything's going really well or things are chaotic and you're just trying to stay alive, stay afloat.
yeah, but I mean, guys like us, we embrace the chaos, right? Like that's where a lot of the fun is. Like it's funny. People are like, "Oh, you must be so busy." My anxiety triggers are not being busy. Like my anxiety triggers are being slow or not having anything to do because I'm like, I should be doing something, right? So I'm probably more anxious when I'm slow than I am when I'm busy. So I'm comfortable here.
Good to know. Good to know. Yeah, I resonate with that a little bit. A little bit
I
meaning
bet
a
you
lot
do.
of bit. Yeah. So, okay. So first question, how the heck are you? Next question is, who the heck are you? What do you got
Right.
going on over there, man? I see the Vegaholic shirt. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. We'll
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit. But from what I understand, you are a franchisee, multi-brand. You've been involved in multiple concepts for years and years.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Let's
Yeah.
dig in there.
Well, I mean, I grew up in entrepreneurship, right? My dad owned family-owned restaurants. So when your family owns a restaurant, you work in a restaurant. That's the way it is, right? So
Okay.
grew up in an entrepreneurial family with my father, and then went to college, but then decided, none of those jobs that I had I liked very much. So my wife and I decided to jump in 2006 and become franchisees for Edible Arrangement.
How were you as a student in school? Because I have a theory, but I'm not always right. Like, were you a good student? Were you like somebody that you liked school? Like, how did that go for you?
I was an exceptional student. I graduated high school valedictorian. I graduated from college with a 3.9 in the top 1% of my class in accounting. And it wasn't really because I loved school. I just hate to lose. I love winning. Like I love rubbing other people's nose in the fact that I beat you. So that was more probably for me than being like, I'm going to really study hard. Like I just wanted to win. I don't care what it is. I always want to win. Now I've mellowed. I'm almost 50. I'm not quite as bad as I used to be, but back then I was maniacal about winning. I just want to win.
That's actually super interesting because what did you say your degree was in? What was your area of focus? Accounting. Okay, so I talked to a lot of people, and obviously you get into franchise ownership, it's an investment, but I lean into a lot of people they leave corporate America and they're very frustrated with their working the 9 to 5. And so they see franchise ownership as an opportunity for them to bet on themselves, but it's oftentimes like a passion play, right? Like it's an opportunity to kind of do something that, yes, they have a financial background and they try not to make bad investments, but I mean, you came in, seems like a fairly young age and went this route. So what was your mindset? I mean, entrepreneurial background, and then maybe this is where I hand it back over to you. So you get your degree in finance and then you get into edible arrangements. What was that like? Why did that happen?
I got tired of working for people and making other people more money than me that I thought I had. I was smarter than. I mean, I thought I'm like, why am I making all these other people more money when I could make myself this money, right? So, for me, it was about being in charge. I enjoy being in charge. I I don't like to fail, but I'm not afraid to fail. So being the decision maker and trust me, I've made a plethora of bad decisions, right? And hopefully I've learned from every one of them, but I'm not scared to make decisions. I enjoy making those decisions and living with whatever the consequence those decisions are. So for me, it was all about being in business, but I also wasn't really sure of what I wanted to do. I wanted some direction and I wanted some guidance. And that's when I decided to do franchising. I was familiar with franchising because one of my jobs before I got into edible, I worked for a convenience store chain and I oversaw their franchise food service concepts: Subway, Arby's, Taco Bell, Steak Escape, Godfather's Pizza, and Baskin Robbins. So I did all 6 of those brands. I even got to meet Fred DeLuca, which is probably one of the highlights of my franchise life because he was at my training session for Subway, right? So this guy was amazing. 40,000 Subway locations and everything. Just to be in the same room with him was, it was, it's like a kid. Yeah, I want his baseball card, right? Because he's incredible. So, so I was familiar with franchising before I did it, and I knew that I needed some guardrails, right? I'm not creative. I can't draw. I'm not the least bit creative, but I'm a doer. I feel like I'm an executor, right? So franchising was an amazing fit for me, and I love it. I think it is the best form of business.
What about not being creative? So you just said that all the things that I'm listening to, almost all of them. I mean, you talked about you failed, but up until this point, the majority of what you've told me about yourself are like positive things, or I would track them if I was categorizing them until you get to not creative. I mean, that's a trait. Like we have strengths, we have don't, but that's one of the first things I heard you say that would be a negative trait to yourself. But you're also saying that in relation to how franchise ownership was the most beautiful thing and how it had blessed your life. What about being not creative in your own eyes, talking about yourself? How did franchise ownership kind of come in and help you take it by the reins and just go?
And Matt, let's get something straight. Like when I talk about like things that I don't do well or all the failures and mistakes that I've made, trust me, there's plenty of things that I did that I don't do anymore, right? Like I was too short-tempered. I was too impatient, right? Like when I started, I didn't lead with empathy. Like I'm a much better leader today than I was when I first started. Because you grow, right? And you develop. So I don't feel overly creative. Like you don't want me in charge of your marketing, but you want to hand me a marketing plan and say, go get that shit done. And I'll go do it. Like, I'll go do it for you, because that's the other thing about franchising that I learned. I didn't know at first, but I learned, and now it's one of my core elements, right? That I try to teach other people is, once you become a franchisee, be a franchisee. Be all in on the game plan, on the ops manual, because I wanted to fight City Hall at first, right? Like I could build a better mousetrap. And it made my life really hard at first. Like I wasn't as successful as I should have been right from the jump because I didn't buy in. And I know a lot of people kind of go through that, life cycle of getting there. Get there faster. Like your life will be so much better when you just buy. Once I bought into the system and got on board with it, we just kept rolling. So it was all these kind of little mistakes that I made that weren't necessarily detrimental big setbacks, but they were learning experiences that I have the most wonderful partner and spouse that always holds a mirror up to my face going, why are you fighting this? Why aren't you on board? Like she will challenge me. She is my business partner. She is my life partner. She is amazing, right? So all these things that she does for me help me get better faster so that these minor setbacks I had didn't become major setbacks.
Got you. Well, that's amazing. What roles did you and your wife have whenever you guys first got started in the business? Did you both go in together with the same capacity, or did that mold over time?
No, we started the business with edible, and my wife was like the on-site daily manager, and I was still working my job. I had a job in pharmaceutical sales that I hated, but I was doing it anyway because we had to max out our credit cards to open the first location. I had no capital. We just maxed out cards at 22.5% interest or whatever the hell it was.
How old were you when that happened?
06. I was 32.
Okay. Wow. So pharmaceutical sales, you're making decent money at the time.
Oh yeah.
I gotta imagine. You're probably over 6 figures. What was your wife? What was she doing before?
Staying at home with the kids.
How many kids you got?
2.
Okay. How old are they now?
21 and 19.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Cool,
I got
cool, cool. Okay.
I got a
Sweet.
senior at West Virginia, and I got a sophomore at the University of Wisconsin. So it's awesome.
Oh, that's cool, man. And you said
Hmm.
before we hopped on, you're in Ohio right now,
Yeah,
correct?
yep, yeah. I'm real close to the Pennsylvania border. I'm kind of smack dab between Pittsburgh and Cleveland. So if I'm a football fan, I go to Pittsburgh. If I'm a basketball fan, I go to Cleveland.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, so your wife, she was staying at the home with the kids. How old were they whenever you guys first launched Edible Arrangements?
My daughter was a little over 2, and that's when my wife said, "Hey, I'd like to go back to work. I want to do something, but I want to control my schedule." And I said, "Well, let's really control the schedule. Let's think about starting a business." And I get this question a lot about starting a business with young kids, but something that we did with the kids, and I've told other people this too before. We helped the kids understand that the business was now a member of the family.
Mm.
Right? Just like the dog is a member of the family. We treat the dog as good as we treat the kids, right? Like, I mean, we take good care of our animals. Like, that's why the business requires mom and dad to be there at certain times, because the business is a member of the family and it gets the same attention that the kids get. It doesn't get all the attention. Right? There are times when the business will suffer to take care of our family or kids, but there are times when, hey, the kids will have to make sacrifices in order for us to be at the business, because the business is a member of the family.
That's actually a really interesting perspective, because it almost creates not to say that the business is just as important as your literal children, right?
No,
Like that's kind of an aggressive statement, but I think a lot of times as business owners, we get so focused on what we're doing and what we believe we should be doing to build our business and build our dreams, that a lot of times we put the business in front of our family, and then we claim that we're doing it for our family when really it's for us and our ambitions the entire time. So I've actually,
correct.
I don't know if I've ever heard it in that way before. That's actually really interesting, because that creates a harmony almost in how we engage with our family and how the kids get to be involved in the business. And that's
Right.
pretty cool. Like, did you have that from the jump, or did you have any like resources or mentors that helped you with that thought process at 32?
My wife and I kind of developed that, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Because we asked ourselves, like, how are we going to treat the business in regards to the family, and how are we going to explain it to the kids so that they understand it? And we're like, well, just like we go out of our way to take care of the dog and walk the dog and do all the different things, like, why is the business any different? It's kind of like a third child, right? And when you're outnumbered as parents, sometimes you got to pick this game over this game. Like, you can't
Yeah.
be at every game. Like, you just have to make some choices. And like, my son was an avid basketball player. Basketball is huge in my family. You can see they got Bob Huggins signed autographed basketballs behind me here from my days
Nice.
at West Virginia. Uh,
Let's go.
but basketball season is February, and February 14th is the busiest day. I do 1,000 orders in one store in an Edible Arrangements on February 14th in just one
Whew.
location, and I had 9 locations. So, I mean, there was always basketball going on. Would I make it to those basketball games? Absolutely. But I would come right before tip off, and I would leave right after the buzzer sounds, and I would go right back. I would watch him play, and I would go right back to work. And I might work till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. But what we told the kids is we would make these same sacrifices for you if the situation was reversed, right? Like, there are times when we will ignore the business and let it maybe, I don't know, suffer, flounder, or just maintain status quo, and we will be with you. So they understood it pretty well.
Now, I think that's important too to notate, is like, I think when people have only the perspective of working a 9 to 5, working as a W-2 employee, everything is constant.
Mm-hmm.
They show up, they clock in, they clock out, they go home. There's small peaks. Certain
Sure.
times are more stressful than others, but life of an entrepreneur, I mean, you're all in so often, but there are also times where you can take a step back, especially if you scale the business, and the business could potentially be on
Yes.
autopilot during seasons. But something I wanted to talk to you about, hearing you talk about going all in, and the mindset of when you're a franchisee, you should go all in with the mindset of a franchisee. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're working 60, 80 hours a week in this business all day, every day, but you are fully embracing being a franchisee. And so the question comes back to kind of like I don't know how tuned in you are as a seasoned franchisee on the rhetoric nowadays when it comes to semi-absentee, semi-involved, semi-passive, executive model franchise ownership. How does that ring to you as somebody who's had to build these businesses from the jump, knowing that you're a franchisee mindset is like, I'm in this?
I think it resonates with me just the way you explain it a lot of times anyway, right? Like it's not going to be, it's very hard for it to be absentee at the beginning, right?
Okay.
Like at the beginning, you're highly involved because it's a new business, right? It's like, just like a child, like it relies on you for almost everything, right? But then it gets more independent if you put the right people in place. If you put the wrong people in place, it requires even more of your time, right? Like I think I heard you say on your last pod I listened to that you used to do all the mosquito treatments, and this year you've done 0, which that's amazing.
That's right.
That's fantastic, right? And that's the way it's supposed to be, because you build your team, right? And we did the same thing at Edible, right? Like one of the most, the accomplishment that I'm maybe the most proud of when I sold Edible in my one store, the busiest store in the system 4 years in a row, the only store to ever eclipse $2 million in total gross revenue in one calendar year. This is like the flagship location of the brand. In that store, I had one manager that had been with me for over 15 years.
Holy cow.
And I had 3 other employees that had been with me for more than 12 years.
Whoa.
I had a girl started working for me when she was 13, working during holidays, and she's still there, and she's like 28 years old. She's getting ready to get married. She still works there part-time on the weekends after her real job. So that was the culture that we wanted to create. And if you want to be more absentee, if you create that culture and coach your team and create an environment where people want to be there and you treat them with respect and the ability to grow, you will have the opportunity to be absentee and let your business run.
Okay, so I hear you talk about building a team where there's mutual respect and the team has ability to grow. And the big theme I'm hearing right now is culture. How the heck did you build a culture to be able to create the longevity with some of those folks? I mean, that was one location, right? That's not all of them. So obviously you had 9, but I mean, that's special. Like, that's really cool. What did it take to build that? And then what were some of the flops that you had to grow through in order to make that happen?
Well, I mean, we had a director of operations that was with us for 16 years, right? And she'd never had a job before she came to work for us. Her name was Shakira Brown. She won Manager of the Year in the franchise system. Again, like you see, I got some trophies behind me. I wish I had that trophy, but she gets to keep that one in her house. But that's the one
good for her.
But the culture we tried to create, Matt, we just kept it really simple. And my dad, he said, do the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And that's a question that we always asked ourselves when we were treating people, whether they be guests or whether they be employees. And our culture was this: to me and my wife and our director of operations, our customers were the team members, not the customers. Like, the customers were the guests of my team members. My guest was the team member. Right. And if I took care of them in a manner, I truly believe that if we took care of them the right way, they would then in turn take care of our guests the right way. And they would treat it as much as they could their own business as we could possibly expect. Right. Because we never expected anybody to treat it like it was their business. My employees' number one, their number one priority is their family. Every time. No question.
Every time. All day.
But we took care of them so that they could take care of their family. And then in turn, we felt like they really gave us that respect back. And we never tried to make it sound like you should be prioritizing our business. That's crazy. Like, that's a team member. Their number one priority is the people that reside under their roof in their household. That is always should be their number one priority. And we never tried to get them to not think that way, right? We just tried to treat them with a high level of respect and do the right thing at the right time for the right reason, and just get them to do the exact same.
That's a LinkedIn clip right there. That one might make it to TikTok. That was good. That was good. I appreciate that. Yeah. We talk about right people in the right seats, and how important it is to be super diligent on. It's not just about being on the bus and setting a permission to play bar, but once you're on the bus, how do we make sure that we always have the right people in the right seats doing the right things? And something that I hear you say, and I'm curious to kind of dive in, like how you actually curated it. Because for us, I understand that with Mosquito Joe, spraying for bugs, spraying mosquitoes, it's 102 degrees right now in Texas. It's hot out here, and
Oh,
not everybody is going to necessarily want to do that for their entire life.
right.
And so I got here this morning and had my meeting with my techs and with my team, and we're talking about, listen, when you guys come, I want to make sure that you guys are developing, and that the day that you leave, if that happens, you're in a better place than you were when you came. So my entire culture is about developing people no matter what seat they're in. And so was there a
Right.
specific thing that you guys did in order to make the position attractive? Because it couldn't have just been, maybe it was, maybe I'm wrong, but it couldn't have been just because you treated them well, right? Like, was there any other
No.
aspect to it that kept somebody there
Yeah.
for over 10 years?
Right. And like you said, don't think we never got it wrong, right? Like my second
Sure.
store that to allude to your earlier question, my second store, I hired the staff and I had to go back 2 months later and fire the entire staff and start completely over again because the store was hemorrhaging cash. It was
Wow.
leaking money left and right, right? So we've missed the mark before. So, but you're right. It wasn't just about treating them good or buying them a pizza or anything like that. I mean, that stuff's nice, but it's overrated. But you got to we wanted to see people grow and move on. Like, I mean, that was
Yeah.
because we could only pay a finite amount of money, right? Like, I mean, there was only X amount of dollars that we could pay, right? So we used what was called the platinum rule. So the platinum
Okay.
rule isn't, the golden rule is treat others the way you want to be treated. The platinum rule is treat others the way they want to be treated. So we would give some tests and some exams to try to understand their personality style. And were they a thinker, a relator, a director, or a socializer? And then my wife and I's job was to not get them to match us, but for us to match them, right? What was most important to them? Because the employees could not bend to my will. They're my guests. I'm going to bend to their will. However they want me to treat them, I'm going to treat them that way and help them grow in that manner. Maybe it is a more social, empathetic type of relationship. Maybe it's more, tell me what you want me to do and I'll run through that wall for you, Ron. So we would treat that person in that way once we understood what their personality style was. And people moved on from us. And I'll give you a perfect example. There was a young man who came to work for me when he was in college. He worked for me for several years and he wanted to move up. I didn't have the capacity for him to move up. He ended up taking a different job and then taking a job with Greyhound. And then eventually he circled back around and ended up being my business partner, bought in. And now he was one of the people that eventually bought me out. So now he owns the business. And he started working for me when he was in high school. So
Wow.
and we coached him and he outgrew us and left, but then eventually became back as we started to scale and grow and then could afford to bring him back as a partner and a director of operations. So, when you leave on those good terms and you have those relationships and you leave those doors open, maybe you're not ready right there at the time, but we were ready later. But we encouraged people to outgrow us. And to me, that was an accomplishment for me. If somebody was like, I have to go, somebody's paying me way more money. And I'd be like, you want me to drop you off? Like, I'll drive you there if you want me to. Like, congrats. Like, it's awesome. I'm super happy for you. Yeah.
One of my most proud moments as a franchise owner is just knowing that I've got a handful of people that started with me making $10 an hour and now they're making 50, 60, 70K salary with full benefits. And it's like, man, praise God. Like,
Amen.
congratulations. Like
Yes.
that's exactly what I'm talking about. And the
Yes.
more opportunities like that I see, it's just a proof of concept for our program. And the way we talk about it is you've graduated from our system. And I think
Yeah.
the longer you stay, and there are positions of level up, I think the longer you stay, the higher your graduation point will be. But man, that is really freaking cool.
And we encourage anybody and everybody, right? We don't care how old you are, what you look like. We just want talent. We just want talent in the room, and then we want to help you grow. We had a young kid. We couldn't get some technology to work at one of our stores one time, and I asked somebody, it's like, you know anybody? Like, yeah, I got a high school kid that knows something. Well, he shows up. His mom drops him off. He's not even old enough to drive, right? And he fixes my technology, and he kind of stays in my vortex and in my universe. And some other opportunities come up, and he continues to grow in this IT space. And he's getting ready to like go to college. And he's like, I'm going to college. I'm like, why are you going to college? You already know more about technology. I'm not anti-college. I love college, but like, you know more than anybody else. I know about tech. Like, let's foster that. Now he's like a project manager for a register systems company, and he makes like mid six figures. He's no college debt. He's like 23 years old.
So something that you've been, I guess the flow of the conversation has sparked a question that I didn't necessarily have for you, but I think it's an interesting one for people to think about. And it's, you've been a franchise owner and a small business owner in your community for multiple decades almost, right?
Almost, yep.
Some time, right?
Yep.
And you talk about the opportunity of creating an orbit, creating a universe, like spheres of influence that you've been around. How important is that, inside your organization, but also outside in your community? Have you seen any, have you seen that impact you, not just your business, but also you personally in any way?
I mean, it's funny that you say that, because we were just talking about it the other day. And I think one of the things I love about being in business so much is really just all these interesting relationships I've been able to cultivate, right? Like, I was a franchisee for the Simple Greek. I actually ran the Simple Greek a little bit. So I have a relationship with Marcus Lemonis, who is a billionaire owner of Camping World. Like, we test. Like, I test with a billionaire. Like, that's weird. Like, right? That's kind of weird.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
And one of the guys who was on his show that owned a whole bunch of pet stores, he and I are very close friends, like very close. We talk daily, right? So, and then just people in my community being able to reach out to them and know that they can help you with something, or, know that they can help your kids with something, be it your accountant or your lawyer or whoever it may be. Like, I've been so blessed. Like, and it's funny because you can't really put a price tag on these relationships, right? But they are gold. They are worth their weight in gold. So I'm always trying to pay that forward or back or whatever it may be, because, young people that are interested in business, I want to sit down with them. I want to talk with them. You know how it is. I mean, you own your own business. We could talk about it all day long, right? Like,
nice.
If you want to do an internship with me, you can jump in the car. You can follow me around all day long. I will talk your ear off. I will answer every question that you have. I love talking about it. I will root for you. I will try to find you an investor. Hell, I might be an investor. I have no idea, but I know that I love the vortex that I'm in and the different people that I've gotten to meet. And I could have never, growing up in small rural country, West Virginia, I never would have imagined myself here, 35 years ago. No way.
Let's go a little bit out of order, because I'm liking this. Let's talk about the importance, whether you're looking at, this show is kind of catered around franchising, but really the bigger picture is entrepreneurship, and then taking the step and betting on yourself. Right. That's like the higher level. And I always talk about the concept of getting in the room. I gave a speech to my guys earlier today about getting in the room. If I can just get into the room and I can stay in here, I can absorb all the information, all the knowledge, all the wisdom, then I have a choice. I can either use that to level up and go find the next room, or I can be really intentional about gaining influence in this room and making an impact here. What would you say to somebody that's younger, that maybe younger in age or younger in entrepreneurial years, and is struggling with getting in the room, or maybe they don't even understand the concept of the importance of getting in the room? What would you say to that person and kind of get them to shift their mindset a little bit?
Well, first of all, I'd make sure that they understood what room they should be in, right? Because I tell young people this all the time. I tell everybody all the time, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Get out the room, because you're not learning anything, right? And you gotta be open, right? You gotta do a lot of listening. And that's something that I wish I could have gone back and told my younger self, because in my early, my 20s and 30s, I talked too much. I ain't listen enough. And then when I finally started to, self-reflect and realize where I was supposed to be, and I started listening a little bit more, then I started to find myself in rooms where the people talking were a lot smarter than me, and I was learning from them, right? Like, so there's always an opportunity to listen and learn. Like I said, ending up on Zoom calls on a weekly basis with a billionaire, and just kind of not only listening to what he had to say, but also like think about the marketing company that he would bring to the table and what, the caliber of expertise that those people were bringing. Like they were exceptional, right? Like what they were doing, and just the people that he had in his atmosphere that ended up now becoming part of my atmosphere. Like he introduced me to Tom Spadia, who is really the foremost leader in franchising, a franchise attorney in the country, out of Spadia Lagana, out of Pennsylvania. And I've gotten so many relationships just by cultivating a great relationship with Tom. And Tom's been a fantastic mentor to me. Like this guy knows everything there is to know because he deals with so many different emerging brands and franchises and things like that. So, one thing always leads to another. So you just, if you're in the room, don't feel like you absolutely have to contribute right away. You don't have to contribute right away. You can just listen and learn. That's okay. Because if you're in a room with people smarter than you, they're going to be okay with you listening. And as a matter of fact, they're probably going to be impressed that you
They don't want you to talk.
Right.
They're not ready for you to talk.
Yeah, right. It's like in Crimson Tide, right? When they're seeing the sunset and the captain says, "Congratulations, you were smart enough to just shut up and enjoy the sunset," right? Like, so like sometimes just shut up and be quiet and listen, and you'll find yourself in the next room if you're able to listen.
So at this moment, let's take a brief commercial break and talk about all the franchise opportunities that you're actually in currently or that you've been involved with. Let's just, if you could give me a timeline, because you're spouting them out faster than I can keep up, man. Let me hit me. I thought I was doing something crazy, but you're doing what I'm looking to do at such a higher level, and so I can learn a ton just from talking to you. But before, let's just, all right, hit me with, so edible arrangements. We're starting there.
Starting with edible, right?
Okay.
And I was in the edible system, and then I decided to diversify, and I went with Simple Greek. So the Simple Greek was a very small emerging brand, but I saw it on television, the CNBC's The Prophet. It was part of that show.
Yeah.
I wanted to be part of a small brand where, more so than edible, I thought I could shape the direction of the brand. Like I could maybe have a little bit more influence given my background and my history. So that actually worked out really well. We opened our first store. The busiest week that the franchise had ever had in any store was about 30 grand. And our first week we did $58,000 in total gross revenue in 1 week. We were doing more sales volume per square foot than a Chick-fil-A in our opening week. And it was a disaster. Like it was a mess. Like you should have seen what a train wreck it was. Now, most of the train wreck was back in the kitchen, so you couldn't really see it. Like the guests didn't know what a disaster it was,
Sure.
but it was one of the hardest working weeks of my entire life. So we scaled to 3 stores in that system. And then that's when Marcus asked me to take over operations of the brand. So I actually took over the brand in October, but then in March we got whacked with COVID, and it basically just shut everything down. So yeah, and so after we navigated COVID and gave everybody royalty relief and did all this, I went to Marcus and I said, "Look, man, we got a lot of things to fix in this brand. You got to give me a few $1 million to fix it, or you got to let me sell this thing." And he was like, I don't really have the appetite to invest millions and more dollars in it because I'm already pretty deep in it. I'm like, okay. So then I sold the brand to WowWorks, which is SaladWorks, Fruitables, Garbanzos, and then they also have Zeets, or they used to be called Zoop, right? So I knew Kelly Roddy in that group through some other acquaintances, and we ended up selling to Simple Greek to WowWorks, and I basically sold
the whole system,
the whole brand, 35 stores, sold the whole brand.
So what happened to the other franchisees that were in the system? They just got looped up underneath the new umbrella company now?
They did, with a lot more infrastructure, right? Like better resources. I mean, it was better for them, in my opinion. I don't know if they'd all agree with me, but that because somebody was probably holding them to brand standards a little tighter than what we may have been. But it gave them more resources. And I mean, I sold myself out of a pretty good job, but it was the right thing to do, right? We do the
What
right
about
thing.
your locations at the time? Because you had 3.
I sold them to WowWorks as corporate locations. So I exited the system at the same time because I didn't really have an appetite of going from being the franchisor to go back to being the franchisee. I thought that might get a little awkward. Like I didn't want people calling me for things and things like that. Like I thought that could make it harder on WowWorks. So we exited at that time and sold all 3 restaurants and just went back to doing just edible arrangements.
Yo, thanks for listening this far. It's at this point in the episode that I want to talk about Streetwise franchising, teaching, training, building. Streetwise franchising. As a franchise consultant, it's my job, it's my absolute pleasure, and it's my mission to help aspiring entrepreneurs find, launch, and build their ideal business. I've been a franchise owner for almost a decade. I know what it means to struggle. I know what it means to build a team. If you're ready to get off of zero, if you're ready to build something for yourself, visit streetwisefranchising.com. Let's get the conversation started. Don't wait until tomorrow to build your future. It starts today. Streetwise franchising. Stay humble, stay hungry, stay streetwise. Let's get back to the episode.
At that time.
So did you still have the nine edible arrangements?
I had divested a couple stores, Pittsburgh. So at that time I was down to 5.
Okay. And do you still have any edible arrangements? Are you still holding on to any?
I sold everything. The remaining locations I sold November 7th of 2023.
Oh, so pretty recent. Having gotten out of that system. Okay.
Yep.
So out of the 9, how many different transactions were there? Got it. And when you were selling them, was it, were you able to just kind of post them on Facebook? Did you biz, buy, sell it? Like, what was that process like?
I sold one actually back to the brand.
Okay.
And then the other 3, I used a broker for all
nice.
transactions. Because they were bigger transactions. Like I sold the 2 Pittsburgh stores in a clump. I only owned the Pittsburgh stores for 5 years. I bought them as 2 existing stores, kind of turned them around, crushed it, and then turned around and sold them after 5 years. And then I sold the last 4. And the one was the one that was closest to my heart because it's right here in Youngstown. And that was the one that was the busiest store in the system, 20, 21, 22, and 23.
So amongst all of that, what would you say was the biggest disappointment, flop, failure, and then how did you overcome that? I mean, was there enough good to compensate for the hardship? I mean, COVID smacked you in the face, but it sounds like you were able to pivot and move around through that. Like, what was maybe some of the harder times that you had to navigate through during that period?
It's weird because edible 18 and 19 were really rough. Edible 18 and 19 were tough. That's when a lot of other companies like 1-800-Flowers and a lot of these other companies really started to make the push to get in that space, berries, things of that nature. The pandemic, Matt, was an absolute windfall for edible arrangements. I've never been busier at edible arrangements than the pandemic. I had stores that doubled in top line revenue during the pandemic. Just think about it. You couldn't go to a funeral. You couldn't go to a birthday party. You couldn't go see somebody that was in a hospital. But you could send a gift. And while everybody was trying to figure out how to deliver things, edible arrangements had the country's largest small fleet of refrigerated delivery vehicles on the road. We already had it. We had all the technology, and everybody was where they should be. We never had to track down a recipient. Hell, they were all at home. Like we just run up to their door, leave it on the porch, ring the doorbell, and bounce. Like it was amazing. Like I thought I was going to go bankrupt, right? Like the first week after COVID hit, I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Because we didn't know PPP was coming or anything like that. And then my numbers went like this, and then they went like this. It was insane. It was crazy.
How did it do after? Was there any negative? Did it kind of go down? Did it maintain? Because home services did the same thing, right? Home services spiked. But then the next couple of years, it kind of like trickled off as people were a little scared of making big ticket purchases around their house.
It did. It was strong. 20, 21, 22 were all strong. And then 23, you started to see, and come on, if you weren't expecting a drop off in 23 as a franchisee, you are not paying attention. I mean, come on. The gravy train doesn't run forever. I mean, you got to be realistic, right? Like, so we expected a drop off, and it did drop off. What was challenging though is just how expensive it got to market at edible arrangements because of keyword ad search and how much Google charges for keyword ad, and everybody's trying to get those search terms, right? I mean, edible is a huge player in that space, and everybody's buying those keyword search terms. So it's really, 85% of our business is e-commerce. It comes through the web. So it really has an impact on because you got to spend a lot to keep up with keyword ad. It's tough. It's challenging.
Yeah, something so little can be so big.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of franchisees, I wonder if there's anything to kind of take to a different industry as a lesson from that. Just you got to be. I mean, what would you say during that time?
You just can't count on the web to continue to drive your revenue forever.
Okay,
You have to have a grassroots presence, right? Like
sure,
that was one of the biggest
got it.
challenges. Well, it was a blessing and a curse with Edible, right? Is they thought that your stuff just kind of fell out the sky, right? They would order it on the internet and then it would just show up. They didn't realize that you had this brick and mortar location, right? So that can be good and bad. It's good because you probably know the coffee shop that messes up your order every time, right? Like there's a Dunkin' that never makes your drink right, and there's a Dunkin' that gets it right every time. So you avoid the one that gets it wrong, and you go to the one that gets it right. At Edible, people don't know. They have no idea. So even if you're bad, they'll keep ordering from you, which that's not necessarily a good thing, right? Like, but it's just the way that it is because it's really weird, right? 99% of our customers aren't getting the order. They're not ordering for themselves. They're ordering for somebody else.
Oh, okay.
Right? So think about it. Like they don't know, the person getting it doesn't know what they're supposed to get. So they think it's amazing, even if it's wrong. They don't
No matter
even
what.
know.
Wow.
So it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's so interesting. I've never really thought about that before. Okay. Not to go too far down that because I can dive in for a while. We got stuff to do today.
Right.
No, it's super interesting. Okay, so we got Simple Greek, we got Edible Arrangements. You've 2013 November or 2023 November. You were out of both of those systems.
Yes.
Okay, from then until today, what's been happening since?
So that was when I was like, okay, what's going to be next for me, right? Is it going to be consulting? Is it going to be, what is it going to be? So, because contrary to what some people think, I didn't sell Edible Arrangements enough to retire. Not even close, right? Like, I mean, let's be realistic. Come on.
Sure.
So I started absorbing like content.
You're too young too. You're too young to call it in, man.
No,
you got more in the tank.
Retire, expire, right? Like I won't retire till I'm like 75. So,
Let's go.
I'm content. I'm listening. And I stumble upon Jamie Weeks on a podcast, and I'm like,
my God.
Oh yeah, I like this. Like this is great, right? Like so. I start looking into Sweat House, and I'm like, oh hell yeah, I love this space, right? Like I love it. So I get a little group together. So we get on board with that. We sign a multi-store deal. We do Youngstown and Pittsburgh. Jamie was a little on the fence about letting us open one in Youngstown, right? Because he was like, that's not a very big market. And I'm like, bro, I've done pretty good. I've done pretty good here. But he did what all great leaders do, right? He gave his opinion. He listened to our opinion. He let us run with it. And here we are. We're under construction. And right now, we're doing really well with pre-sales. Like we're beating out a lot of metropolitan areas with pre-sales right now. Like we're beating Charlotte market. We're beating the Boston market. So we're trending really good here right now. So, luckily we were able to reward his faith in us so far. It looks like as to how we're doing. So we're on a good trend there, and we're already negotiating the second lease in Pittsburgh. So we got that rolling. So we're super excited about that brand. And we looked at I looked at a lot of different things. I regret not getting into home services earlier. Like I envy you guys that are in the home services space because I see what a great growing space it is and what a necessity it is and how customer service oriented it can be. And if you have great service, you can do great things for that brand. So I ain't lying. I'm a little jealous of some of you guys in that home services space that I don't play in right now.
Man, hey, I'll tell you what, the grass is always greener on the other side. I'll just tell you that. No, that's really interesting, man, and that's really cool. So a couple things that I want to comment on. I have no data to actually prove this, but I need to do research. So anybody listening that wants to hit me up and actually like prove this, because I honestly, I think there's something to it that a lot of smaller markets outside of the big metro areas, they actually do really freaking good compared to a market like Dallas. Because you open up a concept like in Dallas, and there's already going to be about 3, 4, 5 other competitive concepts in the area. I mean, DFW, Collin County, where I'm at, is one of the most competitive spaces in franchising that there is. When a new brand comes, it sells out in DFW. That's one of the fastest areas that it sells out. So just from a competition standpoint. So there is something to these smaller markets where if you can go in and you're the guy and you've got some operation experience, you can probably make some waves. And it sounds like you've done that.
You know what? I agree with you 100% because while you may not have as many bodies, the competition for their attention is way less.
Yes.
Right? Like there's not as many people on social media paying for social media advertising.
Yes.
They're mostly organic, right? And like I play basketball with the morning and noon news anchor for the local television station. So when I open, they're going to send the morning crew out and they're going to cold plunge on air, on camera. Like, I can text him. I'm like, hey, bring the TV crew out. We're ready to go. Right. Like, so again, that vortex in this small town atmosphere, like those are the kinds of things that we can pull off here that drive a lot of attention. And like you said, like you could never do that in Dallas. Like the Dallas news isn't coming to cover Mosquito Joe. Like, I mean, not
in Murphy, Texas. Yeah. I mean, the Murphy News might, and the Murphy News has. We've experienced a lot of these smaller subsets, and I'm a networking beast. Like I'm out in the community, I'm out there, but I can only do so much when you have a huge metro area. I can't touch Irving. I can't touch Arlington. I can't touch Grapevine. Like I only have my small sliver. But if you take that to a smaller metro and you take that same intentionality, it just, to me, it seems like it would be easier to become like, you hear a lot of like mayor of the town type of avatars out there. The guy that's really pushing, is making things happen. And so that's really cool. I wanted to ask you about, you said you put a group together. What was that like? Like you obviously have had experience in the industry and you got people to come together. Was this like, are these friends and family? Are these other small business owners? Okay. So what did you have to show other than your experience to get people to come in?
So one of the partners in with us on Sweat House was my partner at the Simple Greek, right?
Okay.
So this was a guy that I play basketball at 5:45 in the morning, 3 days a week. And I've been playing in the game for 14 years, right? So I play 3 days a week at 5:45 in the morning. And
how are those knees, man? How are those knees? They're doing all right?
It's my foot right now. I have a bone spur in my foot. It's my foot. It's not my knee. Okay. But I'm 50. I could still hoop. Like I could still play.
Let's go. Let's go.
But yeah, I met this guy at basketball, and you know he always wanted to get into business. And I said, well, let's partner up. Let's do these restaurants. And he did it with me. And of course, that worked out well for us. We had a good time there, and we had a pretty good exit. And he was like, I'm done though. I had my fill. No more business for me. I'm like, okay. So then I come back around with Sweat House, and he's like, oh man, I don't know. That sounds pretty good. Let me try it again. So he got back on board with Sweat House. And then the other partner is a former Edible Arrangements owner in Texas. Okay. So he owns stores in DFW. He's from Dallas.
Sure.
And he owned like 9 locations in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, sold them all, bought in the Nothing Bundt cake.
Okay.
And they said, we want you to do the Northeast. And he said, no. I want Youngstown, Ohio. And they're like, what? But he knew how well my edibles did in Youngstown, Ohio. So he had insider trading information that they didn't know about. So he's got 2 stores, 2 bakeries here in the area, killing it, crushing it. So much so that he's only been in the system like 3 years, and he's already the president of the Independent Franchise Owners Association. Like he's the president of the association. So super high business acumen, professional, does a lot of great things that I don't do, right? Because when I'm looking for partners, I ain't looking for people to tell me what I want to hear. I'm looking for people that will challenge me. I'm looking for people that will fill my gaps, right? Like,
let's go.
I'm not perfect. I am far from it. I've got a specific skill set, and let me find the people that fill those other holes in my skill set that they're not great. So, and then we got one other guy on board who, again, was a pet store owner. He understands real estate. He's from Florida, so he's not heavily involved, but I love his mind. He's a great friend to me, and he's also a great coach to me, like helping with looking at real estate and looking at different ways to look at real estate and things like that. So that's the team we put together, and we're not stopping with Sweat House, right? Like we've got our locations with Sweat House. We're either going to do more of those, or this group of 4 is going to take that capital that we're going to generate with Sweat House, and we're going to go find the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And we're going to keep building franchise businesses in some of these smaller middle markets and just keep going from there as long as we can just keep generating capital. Because luckily we're all in a space where, we don't have to sit there and wait for a paycheck, right? We can take that capital and reinvest it into the business and grow it and build something either for our families if they want it. My kids have zero interest in being in business. They will not want it at all. They want to they want to follow their passions, which is not business. And I love that about them. I'm super excited for their own path. But it's a great group of people who I genuinely, we're all just together on Saturday night, hanging out on my back porch, having a cocktail, talking a little bit of business, but mostly we're just friends. And we challenge each other. We're not afraid to speak our minds to one another. And we love each other. So it works out really well.
What a beautiful thing. And then Vegaholic, what's going on there?
Vegaholic. So through multiple relationships, somebody said, hey, we got this company out of Canada that wants to find a fractional COO. They want a chief operating officer in the food service. And I was like, well, I spent my whole life in food service, so let me see what it's all about. So we had a couple conversations, and they were like, we want to open restaurants in the United States, and we think you can be like the director of ops and basically director of franchise growth in the United States. And I was like, okay, but I've kind of got out of the restaurant space. I'm like, I got to come up and try the food. So I had to drive all the way up to Niagara Falls just to try the food. And Matt, the food blew me away. It's all vegan. It's all proprietary, right? They're manufacturing all the vegan products. So it's not just like we're taking some vegan product and putting it on a bun or anything. We are making these vegan products. We've got a chicken nugget that'll knock your socks off. We've got vegan shawarma meat. We've got one that's out of soya, one that's made out of jackfruit. We've got a chickpea potato patty spicy that'll knock your socks off. And it's vegan comfort soul food, right? Like it's not weird. It's not funky. Anybody can eat there. And listen, when it comes to food, I'm a snob. I'm a snob. Like I've been in the food service industry since I was 13 years old, washing dishes for my dad. Like I put a high standard when it comes to food, and I could not be more excited about trying to get this brand off the ground in the United States, because the food will absolutely knock your socks off. It's great.
Fair enough. So when you talk about getting it going in the United States, are we going to start seeing franchise locations popping up? Are there going to be more corporate stores popping up first? What does that look like?
Well, first, to be responsible, we have to put some corporate stores in, right?
Okay.
Like we have to prove out, I can't be asking somebody to invest their life savings in us unless we know that we've got a relatively defined business model that can generate some revenue. But we think we can do ease of operations. Like restaurants are complicated, right? But this one's pretty simple. We can keep the hood size minimal. We only have about 15 or 16 SKUs. You don't need 26 employees. Like we really think we can keep it relatively simple for the food service industry, which was critical for me too, right? Because, there are a ton of food service operations that are amazing. All right. And I love listening to those podcasts and listening to those guys and about the brands that they built. But again, I'm looking for what is missing in this sector of food. And I think a simple, straightforward, defined vegan brand is not out there. It's very splintered, right? It's either kind of mom and pop. There's no clear winner when it comes to franchising of vegan food. So I think there's a huge opportunity there.
So what do you guys need from building out the team? Like, what does that look like in bringing it to America? Is there already a team in place? Do they already have it? Are you looking, now that you're on board, to kind of expand on that? What does that play?
Well, right now you're looking at the team.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm bootstrapping this thing a little bit, right? Like, I want to make sure I don't want to burn capital that these guys, either whether they have it or they don't have it, right? Like I started my first company by maxing out my credit card. So I understand how you can leanly, launch a company, but do it still with integrity, right? So, I'm not going to launch it lean and then ask somebody to invest a lot of money into it right away. Like we're going to grow it. We're going to scale it. We're going to use a lot of, independent contractors. Like I've got a marketing and branding guy who's really working on defining the branding. I've got a guy out of Chicago who's working on the distribution to make sure that we can get the products in the United States and get them here safely and securely. So I've got some third-party people that we're going to use. And then as we start to scale this thing, then I'm going to reach out in my bag of tricks to the people that have been blessed to be part of my life. And I'm hopefully going to bring them back in and pull them back into this circle. Some people that I know that have the talent and the skills and the relationships to really start building this thing the right way and be really, really discerning about what franchisees we bring on board at first to make sure that those franchisees are set up for success. Because I don't know if I sleep very well at night. The last thing I would ever want to do is put somebody in a situation where they were part of a franchise system that wasn't successful for them. It would be hard for me to sleep in.
Facts. Well, I respect that sentiment. And man, I walk through life like this with my hands open, taking one step at a time. And I value everybody else that kind of walks forward and seeks opportunities to be a blessing. And so if there's ever anything I can do, I'll say it right here. Please reach out and let me know if I can add value to you guys. But man, Mr. Ron Taylor,
you're already doing it. You're already doing it. I'm getting value out of the podcast. I love listening to what you have to say. I love your LinkedIn posts. Like, you should be really proud of yourself. I mean, you've done very well. I know how you prioritize family. I think your kids are going to really see something as you continue to grow in this role. I think they're going to have something to really look and say, look at my dad, right? Like, it's really something to watch what you've done so far. I know you're doing franchise sales, on top of everything else that you're doing. So you're well on your way, man. You're going to crush it.
I appreciate that, man. It's a journey of a lot of ups and downs, and a lot of times what people see out there isn't what's actually going on. And we've done some pretty cool things over here, and I've got my sight set really high on what we want to achieve. And it's a long journey, man. And my big thing is to enjoy the process and not get too caught up in where I want to go, but enjoy where I'm at. And I don't want to miss, these small things with my kids. And I might miss a game, but I don't want to miss the season. If you catch what I'm saying.
I get it. Right. You might miss a thing here or there, but the essence of what you're doing, you want to make sure that you're there. And that's the beauty of business ownership and building out a team, right? It gives you the freedom and flexibility to be able to do that. So, I know people are always talking about it, like, how do I get to that point? Well, just grind. I mean, you just work at it, and you'll get there.
Facts. Well, man, this has honestly been maybe the fastest 57 minutes of any episode I've done. What I miss. I know we got to wrap this thing up, but what else? What should we have hit on that we didn't yet, man? We got a couple more minutes.
I think you got mostly the ABCs of me. I think it's just. It's funny because, like, I love what I do, but, I think when people misconstrue the fact that when you love what you do, like, every day is a joy. No, it's not. Some days suck.
Yeah. Some days suck.
Right? Like, I love what I do, but you're like me, right? You got vans out driving around with mosquito. The delivery vans were the bane of my existence, man. Like, those damn things were breaking down all the time, or somebody crashed one of them or something. Like, man, that sucks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I love it. I wouldn't want to do anything else. But, like, if you're listening to the podcast, if you're thinking about getting in business, it's not all fun. That's why it's called work. Work and fun are not synonyms. They do not, they're not the same. Like, but
come on, man.
But like you said, you take joy in the journey, right? And, like, what people like you and I end up doing, we end up with basically like a PhD in problem solving, because that's all we do.
Facts.
It's all we do. And if you don't like problem solving, keep your salary job. And that's great. I think that's amazing. But, like, you better love fixing shit if you own a business, because you will always be fixing something.
Come on, man. Preach. Yeah, I just dropped, I'm not sure when this episode will drop, but I recently, actually today or yesterday, just dropped Kelsey Stewart, the CEO of Bloomin' Blinds. And he talks about how there's such a misconception on the American dream, and how people, it almost feels culturally necessary for all people to want to become business owners and entrepreneurs. And it's just not fair, because it's not realistic. No. I mean, it takes a special nuance and a weird switch to be clicked in somebody's mind to actually want it truly, but also to be successful. But if you have the itch, just know through entrepreneurship, there's so many blessings out there, but it is not all easy. It is not all fun. It is a journey, but there's so many blessings and rewards along the way. All right. Here's my last question, man. Here's my last question. Coaching somebody up off of zero, How do you encourage that person to take the step, believe on themselves, and just bet on themselves and enjoy the process?
You know what I really try to emphasize to them, Matt, is just not to fear failure. I mean,
Okay.
my wife and I just started we did our own independent business here a little bit ago, and it failed. I lost money. It didn't make it. Like, okay, like I think these younger kids, because they see so many things on Instagram and TikTok and things like that. I mean, you get like the Cliff Notes version of what it's really like, right? Like most of these people that are successful, they have failed a time or two, if not more than that. So I just encourage them, to get them off of zero. First of all, I don't know if I know Jamie said the same thing too, right? Like I don't know if anybody's ever at a zero, right? Like I tell people all the time, you're never as good as your best and you're never as bad as your worst. You're
Oof.
probably somewhere in between. So
Yeah.
don't let that success go to your head, but don't let that failure go to your head either, right? Like you have some low moments, you have some high moments. You're neither one of those. You're probably somewhere in the middle. So just don't be afraid to make mistakes and don't be afraid to fail and don't be afraid to admit it, right? I think that's the hard part is like, don't be afraid to like, I blew that. That was me.
See,
Right.
that puts me to a follow-up, because that was a beautiful answer. How does somebody decipher when to call it a failure and to then move on from it? I mean, because we can talk all day about, losses or lessons,
Mm-hmm.
and if you fail
Right.
forward, like you're growing, but I mean,
Right.
it's still a failure and it still hurts. So when do you know when to just call it what it is and then move past it versus to continue to try to grind and make it work when the cards don't seem to be falling out?
And that's a super tough question to answer, right? Because you probably had
Okay.
people or heard people on podcasts that are like, I just stuck with it. And then eventually it became successful, right? And and then there are other people like, I just had to cut it loose. I had to let it go because it was weighing me down.
Sure.
I don't know if there's a good answer in general. I think the answer is all about you personally, right? Like, and can you handle it in a dispassionate manner, or are you just so ingrained in the belief that it's going to be successful that you want to keep going? That's a lot about a person's personal journey. For me, it would be all about what would my wife tell me in our candid conversations, because she's the human being that I trust more than anybody else, right? Who will tell me no matter what where we're at, right? So who's your person? Who's your person, right?
There it
So
is.
because we all need a person, right? We can't do it all on our own. It's either a mentor, it's a father, it's a mother, it's a brother, it's a sister, it's a wife, it's your therapist. I don't know who it is, right? Hopefully a lot of the above, right? Like hopefully you've got all those relationships that you can call on. But
Facts.
it is so tough because I know that I've heard story after story about like, hey, I just kept working at this and now look at it, it's a multi-million-dollar company or whatever the case may be. And then other times you just had to be like, hey man, it was time to let it go. So I wish I had a better, like, straightforward answer, but I think that's a self-reflection question where everybody's going to have to really look within and talk to their people and figure out what's best for them.
That's beautiful because it's honest, and it also creates a nuance that not all situations are created the same. Not all success is the same. Not all failure is the same. And, I loved what you said. You're never as good as you think you are, and you're never as bad as you think you are. That's word for word. That's what my football coach in college, Coach Mike Swider, used to always tell us as we were, prepping throughout the week for the next big game. And who's in your circle and who are you actually listening to that's giving value back to you? It's a beautiful thing, man. Well, Ron Taylor, thank you so much for joining the Streetwise stage. You have blessed me. You have blessed this audience and this brand. And I just say thank you so much to the listener. This was fire. If you didn't catch something from this, I don't know what you're doing. You need to listen to it again. Grab your notebook for the second time. And man, until next time, stay humble, stay hungry, stay streetwise. Peace. All right, everybody, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for making it to the end. Hey, if this episode added any value to your life at all, please like it, share it, give me a 5-star review. It's the only way that this show is going to gain traction and help more people achieve their dreams. If you're ready to start your franchise journey, visit streetwisefranchising.com. Let's set up a time to talk. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Until next time, stay humble, stay hungry, stay streetwise. Peace.